I'm Jonah, by the way. For today, I'm going to read some Reddit horror stories. So earlier, I did a live stream about Tagalog horror stories. So this time, I'm going to try English Reddit horror stories. So just in case you guys have links that you want me to read or stories, if you prefer Philippine true Philippine ghost stories, I also have that kind of stories on my PC. But for now, we're gonna do some Reddit horror stories. And hello to my nine viewers. I hope you don't you keep watching. Okay, so all right, so this is horror. I should be serious. Okay, breathe in the aura. All right. So I have here our Ask Reddit. Creepypastas are great, but does anyone have any good, true, creepy stories? So this is inspired by the excellent recent creepypasta thread. Maybe something that happened in your town to someone you know, or perhaps even something you saw on the news. Make me afraid to be alive, people. Okay, so now we're gonna read some comments. Hopefully, we find some scary stories. Hi to Hatake, Kakashi, BG. Hello. Right, first story is from Mastrius. Here's the story. A few years ago, my brother would get a call on his cell phone around 2 to 3 a.m. every night. He would answer, and it was this hellish sounding noise, like static mixed with screams. He changed his cell phone number after a month of this, and it stopped. Then, after a week or so, it began again. The exact same noise, exact same time. Finally, one day, he decided to back dial the call. It was an old man that had no clue what he was talking about. Still, the calls persisted. If he didn't answer, it would call a few more times. No messages were left. He decided to say, screw it, screw it, ended his contract with his phone company, switched to a new one, and then got another new number. You guessed it. The screaming static calls continued after a short delay. By this time, he was terrified every night, unsure why this was happening. He back dialed the number again and got a different person. Around this time, he lost his job and his phone. The call stopped, of course. His phone was disconnected now. So one day, my mom asked me to listen to this weird message she got on our home phone. It was the static screaming. We showed my brother, and he was freaking out. He back dialed the number again, and it said the number was disconnected this time. Never heard from it again after that. End of the story. Yeah, it seems creepy. I hope we knew what really happened here. But yeah, creepy story. Next story here is from Adacor. This happened to a friend of mine. She told me about it a year or so ago. We'll call her Minji. Minji is in her late 20s and works as an English tutor in South Korea. One evening, a few years ago, she was tutoring a high school boy. They were up studying pretty late, and the buses stopped running. Being a long way from his house, the boy asked if he could crash on her floor overnight and get the first bus the next morning. Minji was very reluctant because inviting a teenage male student to stay the night didn't sound like a great idea. But he was begging her, and eventually she relented. They went back to her one-room apartment, and she got into the bed, while he laid a blanket out on the floor, and they both fell asleep. A few hours later, at maybe 2 a.m., The boy wakes Minji up. I'm really hungry, he says. Let's go get some food. Minji opens her eyes and looks up at him in disbelief. Food? It's 2 a.m. Go back to bed. But the student insists. No, I'm so hungry. Let's eat something now. She tells him that there's some ramen in the kitchen and he can fix himself some. This doesn't satisfy him. He doesn't want ramen. There's a 24-hour place just down the road. Let's go there, he said. Eventually, after several minutes of persuasion, the boy gets Minji to come out with him to the restaurant. They leave the apartment and head out. As soon as they are on the street, the boy turns to Minji and says, I'm not hungry. I woke up in the middle of the night and looked under your bed. There's a man sleeping there. They call the police and discover that a homeless man had been living in Minji's apartment, sleeping under her bed for over 2 months. The boy only saw him because he was lying on her floor, so he had a clear view under the bed. The police arrested the man, and thankfully there were no other issues. But that's by far the creepiest thing that's ever happened to anyone I know. Sheesh, that's really creepy. Like, there's an actual person living under your bed. That's another like scenario, like monster under your bed. But this time it's a real person. It's a good thing that this kind of incident happened. So that was actually discovered. So lucky Minji still, I'd say. Next story here is from Orange Derps. A few weeks ago, my girlfriend and I were sleeping together when I woke up to her saying, "What are you doing?" She sometimes talks in her sleep, but this sounded so coherent and urgent that it jolted me awake, and I asked what she was talking about. She then woke up and said she thought she saw someone at the end of the bed. Thinking it was just a dream or semi-awake hallucination, we thought nothing of it and went back to sleep. About an hour later, I woke up and saw someone standing on the bed, with the sheets wrapped up and twisted to their neck. I didn't know what to do, but the first thing that came out of my mouth was, "What are you doing?" My girlfriend then woke me up. I had been dreaming the exact same thing that she did, and said the exact same thing. I know it's the power of suggestion or whatever, but F that. I think that would make it hard to sleep. And yeah, was that really like supernatural? But that's creepy for sure. Scribbling Des story. When I was in 8th grade, I went on a school trip that was called the Louisiana Tour. It was mostly going around to significant sites in South Louisiana. One of the places we went was Myrtle's Plantation, which is considered to be one of the most haunted places in the country. There are all kinds of stories about the place, but at one point, we were standing in a room as part of a larger group, and the tour guide was talking about something. I don't remember what. As I'm standing there, I start to hear what sounds like someone hitting a piano key. After I heard it a couple of times, I started to look around for the source of the noise. I didn't see a piano, but I kept hearing it. So I asked my friends who were standing near me if they heard it. They said no. When I heard it again, I said there is it again, and that they must have heard it. They thought I was crazy. So I went back to looking around the room. Everyone's eyes were on the tour guide except for one woman. She caught my eye and pointed at me and then ear at her ear with a questioning look. I realized she was asking if I heard it too, and I nodded. At this point, the tour guide starts telling a story about a soldier who had died there and that he played the piano and multiple guests had reported hearing him playing in the night. I honestly didn't know what to think. I guess I still don't. I talked to the woman as we were all leaving the room, and she had heard the exact same thing as me. But her husband and son had not heard it. We had a reply about this story. It's from Abderp 1022. I work at the Myrtles Plantation, and I have so many of these stories and events that visitors tell me. The creepiest is one, in my opinion, is that you can sleep at the plantation kind of like a bed and breakfast. Well, we have a room that is filled with those creepy ceramic dolls. There is one doll, though, that was one of the children's favorite, and always was in the bed with her at night. The child later died, too long to explain, and the doll stayed on the bed with her. When we started to house guests at the Myrtles, we kept the doll on the bed in memory of the child. The first night when someone slept in the room, they moved the doll to get more comfortable. In the morning, the doll was back in the bed, with its hands on the guest's throat. How big is this doll? She came out outraged, accusing us that we did something in her room. No one went in or out of her room that night at all. The next guest moved the doll as well, and when he was sleeping, he heard tapping on the wood floors. He woke up and noticed the doll on the floor where the sound was coming from. Everyone who stays in the room and moves the doll will come and go back in its bed. I wouldn't want to sleep with that doll in a bed. Especially it's a ceramic doll. It's creepy. Just sleeping with that kind of a doll in my bed is already creepy enough. Whew. Okay. We have a story from Stinky Raptor. I posted this story before to another thread a while ago, but it seems like the perfect place for it, and it's fairly short, so here it is. When I was growing up, one of my best friends told me about a very creepy situation involving him, his younger brother, and a man in the window. When my friend and his little brother were younger, they shared a bedroom. They're some years apart, but his younger brother was born with a multitude of different health issues, including multiple sclerosis, and he's confined to a wheelchair and cannot care for himself. So, to keep an eye on him overnight, when his parents couldn't, they shared a bedroom. One night, my friend randomly woke up for no in particular reason and happened to glance over at his younger brother. But he noticed something very startling. A strange silhouette of a man wearing a top hat, looking in through the window behind his younger brother's crib. The first thing my friend did was jump up and turn the light on, then ran into his parents' room to tell them what he saw. When his parents came back into the room to investigate, his younger brother was having a seizure in his crib. A few of his family members say it was his younger brother's guardian angel standing in the window that night. My friend believes it was death. It's all still pretty unsettling to me. Yeah, both are possible, but I think it's a good thing that you were able to see that figure because it prompted you to check out on your brother. And I think that would be like an angel that helped him. Next story is from Tony FX. When I was younger, I had an imaginary friend. Oh, we're talking about imaginary friends here. So, when I was younger, I had an imaginary friend who lived in this massive antique dresser. We chill out, and I vividly remember him telling me stories. Wow. Although I have absolutely no recollection of what they actually were. I remember one day talking to my parents about it. Dad traveled quite a bit, so he wasn't up to date with what I was into. And when I started telling him about my dresser buddy, he wanted to know his name. It was something innocent like Peter or Patrick, but I can still see him going white in the face. I drew Peter/Patrick out for him, and the very next day, him and my uncle took out the dresser and burned it. Why? Why? It wasn't until a few years later when I found out that my dad's little brother, my uncle, also had the same friend with the same name who lived in the same antique dresser. Oh. After a few months of the typical imaginary friend shit, my uncle started having night terrors and couldn't sleep because of Peter/Patrick. It got so bad that they had to move him out of his room before he managed to get back to normal. Thanks for the gold kind stranger skimmed through the comments and will probably answer the most common questions. He had a list here. Number 1, the dresser was an old dark wood ugly thing. As far as we know, it belonged to my great great grandfather, who had always been into some weird shit, if family history is to be believed. Number 2, Dad never talked about what was actually in the dresser, and he was the only one who believed his brother when they were kids. Number 3, my uncle's night terrors ended when they moved him to another room. The bedroom he was in with the dresser was converted into a little sitting room since it had some nice views. Okay, there goes a list, but I'm not gonna read it. It's just some details about the story. But wow. Wow, that's one friendly imaginary friend. But yeah, I think it's that could be an evil spirit living there pretending to be like a good friend. And I wonder why your father or your uncle didn't destroy that dresser when they were already adults. But maybe they forgot about it already. Next story is from Thrift Shop Knickers. On a somewhat similar note, when my son was about 3, he had an imaginary friend in his room who he used to talk to all the time. He would tell us stories about things she would tell him, and we'd hear him chatting to her at bedtime. We thought it was pretty cute. After a few months, my son said he wasn't friends with her anymore. We figured he was over his phase of seeing her. So we were surprised to hear him still talking to her at night. Then he started not wanting to go to bed and having really bad dreams. At some point, we ended up asking a lot of questions about her. We had assumed she was a little girl, but apparently she was 47. She lived in the wall, and he stopped being friends with her because she wanted him to call her mommy. Her name was something like Margaret. She wanted him to come and live with her on the wall. He had told her he didn't want to talk to her anymore, and she wouldn't go away. We eventually moved house and he stopped talking about her. Funny thing is, when I was pregnant with him, living in the same house, I used to have dreams about a lady sitting at a dining table in our bedroom, except it was obviously a different era, and the room was not a bedroom at the time. The lady used to knit and make me listen to her giving me parenting advice, while her two 20-ish year old sons at the table sat at the table quietly. Ah, yeah. It's one thing that the maybe we can say ghost or imaginary friend wanted her to be called mommy, but it's creepy when she said she wanted him to come and live with her on the wall. I think that's really what's scary about having imaginary friends. It's like you don't know if it's just your imagination or if it's really something evil. Next question. Next question. Next story is from Skywing Nova. About a couple weeks after I was born, my dad's best friend Jim died. They were really close, and one of the last things he wanted to hold little me before he passed. His wish was fulfilled, and some short time after that, he was gone. Fast forward 7 years, I'm now a happy 7-year-old with a 5-year-old brother and recently born sister. One day the phone rings, and with my mom and dad in the washroom, I thought I was going to be ignored as we kids were still too young to answer the phone. No call display. We didn't know if there would be a stranger. But my brother broke the rules and answered, "Hello?" At this point, my dad is out of the washroom and is asking my brother to hand him the phone. He ignores him and keeps listening to whoever is speaking. Before my dad could ask a second time, my brother hangs up, looks at him, and says, "Jim says hi," and he misses Skywing Nova, then goes back to playing. The look of shock my dad had is what I remember most about this. Skywing Nova. Okay, next question. Next question. Why do I keep saying next question? Next story. Next story is from Deleted. His name is Deleted. I was once featured in a St. Jude Survivor newsletter when I was about 5 years old in the early 90s. The newsletter went out across the country and apparently into Canada. There was this guy named Mitchell that called my family up out of the blue because he had read my cancer survival story. He lived somewhere in Canada and claimed to be this big-time Christian and wanted to talk to me, God, in prayer. My mom let him talk to me for whatever reason, and the guy actually just wanted to talk to me about ALF. This Canadian dude named Mitchell was obsessed with ALF and somehow got a hold of our mailing address and sent me tons of ALF merchandise, coloring books, pencils, ALF everything. It's ALF. Assisted living facility? Is that what ALF here means? Okay. For some reason, my parents let him talk to me whenever he would call, because they bought into his God stuff and liked how he sent me ALF crap. This went on and off for about a year until he asked me if I had ever heard of John Wayne Gacy or Gacy. He told me who he was and that he had escaped him when Gacy tried kidnapping him when he was a kid. He told me I should tell my parents they shouldn't trust strangers because you never know who you could really be talking to. I remember he didn't sound menacing when he said it, just matter of fact. Of course, my parents freaked when I told them that, and they changed numbers and called the police. They never really did anything since the guy did live in Canada by all accounts and hadn't really threatened me. Also, keep in mind, Mitchell somehow had our mailing address and knew exactly where we lived. We had plans on moving soon anyway, though. Fast forward 10 years to about 2001, we live in a new house, a new state, everything unlisted. I'm now 15. What did we get in this what did we get in the mail? Yes, you guessed it. An effing ALF coloring book. Oh, John Wayne Gacy. Maybe this is someone popular. Kidnapper? John Wayne Gacy. Ah, okay. He is an American serial killer. Oh, that's creepy. But yeah, I think the moral here is really don't trust strangers, especially do not give your mailing address. Whatever freebies you could have, that does not matter. Because if somebody has your address, they can do a lot of shit. Creepy. We have another one here, Slot Rapunzel. That's the name. Hard to say what qualifies as creepy. It could maybe be seen as heartwarming. I don't know. My mother swears this is a true story, and frankly, I don't see why she would lie about it. My mom had 3 kids. There's me, the youngest, and my older brother. But before either of us were born, there was Jonathan. He was a sweet little blonde boy, big blue eyes, known for accidentally repeating, "Dad swears in church." Wholesome kid, great in school, active outside. When he was almost 6, he was riding his bike and fell and hit his head on a rock. He got up and he said he felt fine. My mom found him the next morning in his bed when she tried to wake him up to get to kindergarten. One pupil dilated and the other not. She got him airlifted to the nearest hospital. During this time, Jonathan's best friend Nick was sitting at the breakfast table eating cereal. Nick suddenly gets up from the table and goes to the door. When his mom asks him what's up, Nick says that Johnny was calling for him. You see, Nick and Johnny lived on separate blocks, but they weren't allowed to cross the street without a parent yet because they were still fairly young. But they lived close enough to call to one another to come out to talk at their respective street corners. So Nick goes out to the street corner while his mother receives a call from mine that Johnny was just declared dead in the hospital. Idle brain aneurysm that was triggered by the fall. Nick's mom can hardly handle this news and is now wondering where her son went. But Nick comes back a few minutes later and says that he heard Johnny calling to him, but he wasn't at the street corner when he looked, then sits down to continue eating his cereal. When his mom asks Nick what Johnny was saying, Nick says he had to come say goodbye. My mom told me this story when I was young, but it stuck with me. I wish I could have met him, but truthfully, I wouldn't be here to type the story to all you random strangers if he hadn't died. My mother only wanted 2 kids. I'm thankful for the chance I was given to live and feel like he died for me sometimes. I'm not religious, but I do feel spiritual when I think about Johnny. Obligatory edit. I submitted this in between classes, and I'm legitimately surprised to see it was read by more than one person. Thanks for reading a part of Johnny's story. It's scary to think of a little trigger in your brain just waiting to be set off to kill. But my parents said if they had known it was the 80s and there was no reason to suspect such a thing would be an issue for such a bright, energetic boy. Johnny wouldn't have gotten to do all the fun things he ended up doing, playing baseball, climbing trees, and just being a kid. And that would have been like having no life at all. Mm. Yeah, that's a sad, sweet story of friendship. We have another story from 6 Pints a Second. Credit where credit is due. URW Bingham. It was near Halloween time when my friends and I were telling ghost stories. My friend said she was going to tell a story about her parents' first date. Parents' first date. She said she didn't like telling the story since it was actually true, but we prodded her on. To cut to the chase, the parents had spent a nice, if awkward, first date. And around the time that they would have said goodnight, the male in the situation, my friend's dad, suggested that they go for a midnight hike up Provo Canyon. He apparently knew the place since he had done a fair amount of rock climbing in the area. So the two drove up the mouth of the canyon, got out of their cars, and started hiking under just the light of the stars, since it was a new moon. At some point, the male starts getting a bad feeling since the pathway ahead, which would pass under some trees, would be dark, and because it was getting to be quite late. He ignores the feeling and presses on. In later rehearsings of the story, the female would say that she had felt the same feeling at what was probably the same time, though she didn't know the trail like he did. A minute later, the feeling came back to the male. He ignored it again and started walking a bit off the way into the trees when his foot hit something soft in the middle of the path. Under the trees, it was too dark to see just what this soft thing was, and the feeling came back stronger than ever. Instead of finding out what his foot had bumped into, he and the female both agreed to hightail it out of there. Years later, after being married for some time, they were watching an interview with the serial killer Ted Bundy. In response to a question asking him to describe the time that he felt the closest to being caught, he explained about the night that he lured a girl into Provo Canyon and had just killed her when he heard some people coming up the trail. He explained how he hid in the trees just in time, only to watch some guy walk right into the body and for some reason just turn around and walk away. TLDR, friend's parents stumbled onto a fresh corpse left by Ted Bundy on their first date. Wow. That's well, we're not really sure if that was what happened. It might be a coincidence, but yeah. Based on the story, this could actually be what really happened. And I think it was a good idea that you guys run because that's a serial killer there. We don't know what could have happened. Story from Meta Game X. That reminds me of a less spooky, more grisly event that I experienced. I used to jog through a canyon on the outskirts of my town. Train tracks run straight down the middle of the canyon. One evening, I ran my usual route closely following the train tracks. It was getting dark, but I figured I knew the route pretty well, so in the evening light, I kept following the route to its end. Sometimes I'd weave off the tracks because a train was passing by. Near the end of the route, I noticed a foul smell, but I figured it was just the still water that sometimes pools in the middle of the canyon. That, that sometimes pools in the middle of the canyon. I made it home fine that evening. The next day, around midday, I ran the same route. I once again came to the end of the route, where I'd smelled the foul smell the previous night. In the middle of one of the train rails, I saw a decapitated horse head, eyes just staring wide, a bit of the spine and vertebrae showing. No blood, but a pretty strong stench. I did come close enough to confirm that, yes, it was looking at some severe equine head. Maybe someone wanted to grind down horse heads into pet food or something. There were also horse trails out in the canyon. Maybe someone took their horse along the train tracks, the horse slipped and injured itself, and they couldn't move the horse before a train came by. Anyway, I made my way home a bit faster than usual. Then I stopped running that route for 2 years. Another thing to remember if you jog in somewhat wild areas: lonely bobcats, lonely feral cats, and human babies all make the same howling cry. If you hear a baby crying, especially at night, just keep on running. And if you see a jeep pulled over on the side of a rarely traveled path, there's an 80% chance people are effing in it. Okay. Story from Lays says Pod 2. I am about 98% certain I pissed on a dead guy at Seattle's Gasworks Park on a dark New Year's night at the turn of the millennium 1999 to 2000. My friend and I were gonna go see the fireworks at the Space Needle, but because terrorists had been caught sneaking tons of bombs across the Canada-American border earlier, the authorities wouldn't let crowds near the Space Needle. So we went across Lake Union to watch from Gasworks Park. When the fireworks were over, it was dark, and I had to piss like a racehorse. We stumbled into some bushes, and I opened fly and let loose. As I was done, I started to walk away, and my foot hit something soft, like a leg, and I freaked out and ran. My buddy chased after me, asking me what's up, and I told him that I think I accidentally pissed on a sleeping bum, which made him laugh. And I definitely didn't want to go back to apologize, for fear of getting the shit kicked out of me. The next morning, on the news we read that a body had been found at Gasworks. I don't totally remember, but I think it was a murder of a homeless dude. The newspaper didn't mention whether he was covered in piss or not. Okay. Deleted commented here. Were you scared the cops would trace your DNA? But Pincher says, imagine that case remains unsolved and they have your piss DNA on file, and one day it gets matched to you. Don't worry though, everyone in this thread has your back. I'll donate 1,000 karma for your defense. Okay, we have a story from the PWNY Danza. When I was younger, my family was extremely poor and lived in a very old mobile home on some land my grandpa owned. This piece of land was in a very small town out in the middle of nowhere, Texas, and was covered in woods. The town itself was your typical small country town where football was king and there was nothing to do but get drunk or high on the weekend. It was also the type of town, along with it being early 90s, where one didn't typically have to worry too much about locking their doors or setting an alarm. Now, our trailer was a two-bedroom, and my parents, always putting us kids ahead of themselves, slept in the living room on a fold-out couch. My room was directly connected to it, and my sister's room was down the hallway past the kitchen and bathroom at the other end of the trail. One night, after everyone had gone to bed, my dad is woken up by a feeling that there is someone in the room. He looks around a bit and sees a large male figure sitting in the easy chair just feet from the bed. My dad quickly flipped on the light switch next to his bed and saw it was a neighbor from down the road named Carter. Carter was known to be a frequent drug user and was often in trouble with the law because of this. My dad asked him what he was doing here and told him to get out, and he responded, "I can't get out. The demons are chasing me, and your house is the only safe one." My dad, who I should say is fairly large and terrifying person, responded that if he didn't get out and get out quickly, that the house would be a lot less safe for him. "If I leave, they'll get me. They've been chasing me all night. If they catch me, I'm dead." My dad's response was that there were no demons, but that if he didn't get out of the house, he'd be dead. From what I've been told, since I was asleep for this part, my mom also hurled a few threats, and while she may not be big, she was equally as terrifying. I believe it was her anger that finally scared him off. My dad got up and locked the door and watched through the blinds as Carter decided. Since he couldn't outrun the demons, he'd steal our old beater Suburban that my dad always left the keys in. He drove around for about an hour. We called the police, and it took them about that long to get out to us since the closest police station was about 20 or 30 minutes away. He finally brought it back and was arrested and taken to jail. He was deemed crazy and ended up locked in a mental institution. The scarier part is that for years after this, we'd get phone calls where all we'd hear is music that would have lyrics like, "I'm going to fucking kill you." These calls lasted for years and followed us from house to house, even though we always had different numbers and would even be in different states. We always thought it was him sending us a message. The call stopped when I was 12. I later found out that it was around that time that Carter thought the best thing he could do for himself was soak himself in gasoline and set himself on fire. I think that's to be expected from an addict, and people can be scarier than ghosts. Next story is from Oliver 3Rs 36. This happened about 2 years ago to me, but it was pretty unsettling. I'll start by saying I used to have a shop in an over 100-year-old building that was split up into three different storefronts. I had one shop, my best friend had another, and then the third was rented to another girl. One day, I'm at the shop when the phone rings. A man is on the other line, asking me for something or other, and is being really spacey. I am trying to talk to him, but there are long pauses before his answers, and he is just being a little odd. Finally, I ask him something and there is a long pause on the other end. Long enough to make me ask, "Hello?" Because I think he was hung up on me. Instead, he replies with, "Oh, I'm sorry. I'm just having a hard time focusing on our conversation because there is a spirit standing next to you that is yelling to the phone, trying to get my attention." At this point, I'm intrigued and decided to play along, so I say, "Oh, really? What is he saying?" The psychic goes on to make a few broad comments about me and the space I'm in, all of which he could have easily found if he had looked on our website, so I'm not impressed, and says the man has been in the building since the early 1900s and is infatuated with me, has been following me for years, and frequently tags along with me to my house, my friends' houses, and even places like the grocery store. Okay, that's interesting, but then it gets more so. He tells me the man is very jealous of the guy that I am dating and doesn't like him because we are so close. He then goes on to say that the spirit hurt the guy I am seeing when he was doing renovations on the building, which was 100% accurate. I put that story below, and that he didn't like that he was in his personal space changing it. So that was weird, but his next comment really bothered me. The psychic says, "And he is very glad you broke up with that army dude. He really hated him." Now, this was weird to me because I had dated that guy about 3 years prior before and had been restationed right after we broke up and had never set foot in the building, nor had I seen him since we broke up. At the time of the phone call, I had only had my shop in the building for about 6 months, so I couldn't figure out how this spirit would know about him. The guy told me some other stuff, most of which was pretty basic. And then I finally got him off the phone because he started getting weird, and I just wasn't interested anymore. The whole conversation lasted about 15 minutes, and I was thoroughly creeped by his couple of comments and couldn't figure out how he knew so specifically the last two people I had dated. I should add that I don't have any personal social media that someone can search me for, so there wouldn't have been any couples pictures up of me with either person I dated. Then it dawned on me. I had worked for about 6 months for my friend at her shop in the same building for some extra cash after I moved back to the city, which was about 4 years prior in the time that I had dated/broken up with the army guy, which would also explain why the psychic said the spirit had been following me for years. I no longer have the shop in that building, but still go in there every now and then to see my friend. We both agree that building has some bad vibes, especially at night, and there's a couple more weird things that happened to me while I had the shop there. Stalker ghost. There's a TLDR here. Psychic guy calls my shop and begins to tell me all about the spirit who lives there and is in love with me and hates all the guys I date. So before I opened the shop, the guy I was seeing at the time agreed to help me put ceiling lights up, which involved having to go into the attic. Now, the attic, like any old building, was nasty, so I bought him one of those industrial dust suits to wear and a mask so he wouldn't be breathing in asbestos and whatever else was up there. He's up in the attic and I'm on the floor underneath, and we are communicating through this little hole that we are installing the light into. When I hear him yell, then his voice gets really rushed and agitated, like he is irritated with me that I'm taking too long. So finally, about 10 minutes later, we get the light up and he comes barreling down the steps to the attic and flings the door shut. He looks really freaked out and begins ripping off the dust suit and pulls up his shirt. On his left side are 3 long claw marks slash scratches running the length of his side, one of which was bleeding. He looked at the dust suit, no scratches through it. So he didn't get caught on something, and the scratches were too widely spaced to have been a rodent's. Plus, he hasn't seen anything when he was up there. According to him, he had felt weird up there to begin with, but the last light we were installing was all the way in the back corner of the attic, and he was lying on his stomach feeding me the cords down the little hole when he felt what felt like a whip go across his side. Boyfriend gets scratched by a known entity in attic, which psychic claims was the spirit in the building who is in love with me. You Pick My Name story. I was visiting family for winter break in Los Angeles. This was about 5 years ago. I was heading to the bathroom on the second floor of my aunt's house when I saw my cousin April on the stairs. April was 4 and very animated. She was busy making funny faces while sitting on the stairs. I asked her what she was doing. She said, "I'm copying the lady with the braid." I looked around. There was no one else but us. I asked, "Where is the lady, April?" She pointed to a beam running parallel to the stairwell. I asked April, "What is the lady doing?" She said, "Making funny faces." I smiled and started walking up the stairs again when April said something that stopped me in my tracks. April, "Her braids is around her neck." I turned back and asked April to repeat herself. April pointed. "The lady is hanging by her braid. She's making funny faces." Then April started making a face, which I then realized was it someone gasping for air. Sheesh. Okay, I think that's the end of this thread that I am reading. So, yeah, I think that sums it up. Let me try to read from the book True Philippine Ghost Stories. Let's start with volume 1. Okay, so the story I'm gonna read is from True Philippine Ghost Stories by Gianna Maniego, copyright 2002 by Psycom Publishing Incorporated. So I'm gonna scroll and check for a story here. Okay, I have a story here. It's My Curse, as told to Jerry Barrinuevo. Is it a gift or a curse? Maybe for some it is a gift, but for me it is a curse. You see, I'm like that kid in the movie I See Dead People. It all started when I was a kid. Even at the young age of 4, I could already see weird things that people around me did not see. There were times when I would run to my mother screaming and pointing out a spot where I see something or someone. I thought these things were normal, but as I grew up, I realized that it wasn't. It wasn't normal. I wasn't normal. I knew there was either something special or something wrong with me. Others call me a clairvoyant. Others say I'm a psychic who has who has a third eye. But whatever term you use, there is only one way to describe it. I see dead people. Part 1: A Whisper from the Dead. My grandmother was a faith healer, a powerful one, according to my titas and my cousins. She was probably the one from whom I inherited my ability to see and sense the supernatural. And this would explain the affinity I shared with her. My Lola and I were close. I would spend endless hours by her side, watching her as she performed and cured her patients. I would see her extract bugs and other disgusting stuff from the mouth of my Lola's patients as he healed them. I would often peek into her chest, baul, and wonder at the weird stuff it contained, like potions, herbs, and a hanky which bore a pentagram. She identified all these things to me. It was a very painful experience for me to witness her death in the hospital. I saw how doctors tried to revive her, their desperate efforts to bring her back to life. But their efforts were futile. It was really my Lola's time to leave the world. My family and I grieved at my Lola's hospital bed, especially me, because I was her pet. I cried and cried because I knew I would never see her again, never be able to talk to her again. Little did I know, I was wrong. My family became busy with preparations for the burial. They argued over where to bury her, what coffin to use, and what my grandmother would wear inside her coffin. I was there listening to them argue about the dress. Suddenly, while the rest of my family stood bickering, I heard a whisper which did not come from the people who were talking. It was my Lola's voice. I listened very carefully to what the voice was saying. She was telling me what she wanted to wear was a green polka dot dress, the one that had butterfly sleeves like the ternos that former First Lady Imelda Marcos used to wear. Though my hair stood on end, I relayed the message that my Lola gave me. Mom, does Lola have a green polka dot terno? I asked. How did you know your Lola had that dress? My mother asked in astonishment. She whispered it to me. She wants you to put that one on her, Mom, I answered. At that, my family stopped arguing and decided that the green polka dot dress would be the dress my Lola got to wear. Part 2: My near-death experience. One time, I had a wild night with my friends. We had gone to a party where we drank till we dropped and smoked marijuana. Pretty soon, I was inebriated, alcohol and grass mixing inside my system. As we drove home, I suddenly felt bad. I felt weird. All of a sudden, I blurted out that someone will die that night. Having said that, I had difficulty breathing. Then it was gone. I felt myself getting lighter and lighter. I looked at myself and realized I was floating in the air. I looked down and suddenly saw my body lying prostrate in the back of the car, a friend of mine crying over my unconscious form. Is that me? I asked curiously. Suddenly, I saw two faceless beings saying, "Come with us." In the distance, I could see my uncle gesturing. That's funny, he's dead, I thought. I tried to figure out what my uncle was gesturing about. Then I realized he was telling me not to go with the two faceless beings. So I told them I didn't want to go with them. They told me to justify why they shouldn't take me with them. First of all, I said, I want to be with my family. But the beings didn't accept that. Then I said I was still too young. That didn't convince them either. Then I told them that I had not finished what I had to do, and I wanted to do more. This did the trick. In an instant, I was back in my body. I felt severe chest pains. My friends quickly drove me to a hospital. My body was unconscious, but my mind was awake and alert and watching everything that was happening. I could see the two faceless beings guarding me. I saw my body being placed on a stretcher, and how doctors pumped my seemingly lifeless body, trying to revive it. After what seemed like an eternity, I was revived and the two faceless beings left me. That night, a doctor came into my room and asked the nurse what happened to me. The nurse told the doctor that I had a heart attack, but the doctor did not believe it. He said I was just high on drugs. The next morning, I told my friends that I saw everything that happened. I related each and every detail of the night before. They were all amazed because they were certain that I was asleep and unconscious that night. Okay, I think that would be all for this live. I'll try to do more live streams. Maybe next would be True Philippine Ghost Stories, or I'll try checking for other Reddit ghost stories. So if you have stories you want me to read, please comment below the link. Or if you want to share your own story, please send an email to takotanwithjonah@gmail.com. So again, thank you for watching, guys.